So today I'm making schiacciata all'uva, and schiacciata is like a focaccia, but it's thinner and chewier, and it's quite a famous bread in Tuscany. But the schiacciata all'uva is a very Tuscan sweet baked good, which uses 2 layers of dough, sometimes 2 layers, sometimes one, but a lot of times 2 layers, with grapes. And the grapes are obviously ripe and ready and sweet, because September is the month of la vendemmia, which is the big grape harvest. And in fact, they are getting ready to harvest all the grapes to make wine here in Tuscany. The thing about schiacciata all'uva, sometimes I have been of the opinion that if I'm going to eat a sweet, why wouldn't I just eat cake rather than a bread that is pretending to be a cake? But that depends on which schiacciata all'uva you get, because some people make it with a very small quantity of grapes and it's very high, like a proper focaccia, not a schiacciata, and then it just feels like you're eating a lot of bread. Whereas I like mine to be really juicy and laden with fruit, and then it becomes something much more dessert-like, at least in my opinion. And if you have the 2 layers, you sort of get like a jammy layer, like a layer of grape marmalade in between, and then on top the roasted grapes, and then you have some olive oil on top, and sometimes some rosemary, and it feels just all of those flavors, the olive oil, rosemary, and grapes, is so simple and so rustic, and you can really feel transported to 100 years ago when, well, they still do it now, but it feels to me very old-fashioned, like that idea of these women just making great slabs of schiacciata in abundance for all the people, the men and women who are working in the fields and the vineyards, just picking all the grapes and doing different jobs for la vendemmia, the grape harvest. And it's such a lovely culmination of the flavors of Tuscany, and it's rustic, but when I feel like when the ratio of fruit to bread or dough is right, it can feel very juicy and sweet and more like a strudel, without like puff pastry, obviously, because it's not flaky, it's still a dough. So that is what I'm aiming for. I'm sorry, I'm so out of breath. Pregnancy, but that is, I think that just comes down to also how thin you spread out your dough, and then just how much fruit you add, how many grapes you add. If I think of September, I think of schiacciata all'uva. This is the dish of the month. Everyone is just preparing for la vendemmia here, because we have vineyards. It's just down that way, and it's lovely. Now we go past, and they look like they're so juicy and ripe and ready. But now it's always a time when everyone's looking at the sky, looking at the weather, and we had a little bit of rain, and obviously you want to, if you're a farmer or if you have vineyards, you want to choose very carefully the time that you pick the grapes. How peaceful, just sitting here in the sun picking grapes. Fortunately, it's become a little bit cooler, but it's still very hot. It was so hot before that we couldn't eat outside even, and now finally we have our dinners in the evening out here at this table, and I can still sit outside and cook, which I love, because I love filming in the natural light. But previously it was just like that heat wave, and now it certainly doesn't feel like autumn, it doesn't feel like fall, but it just feels like a more pleasurable summer that is a heat that one can enjoy. And I am looking forward to autumn, though, looking forward to all the dishes that I can cook. See, it's all gone all nice and puffy. I was just checking if the yeast was still good, so this is good. It's foaming up and telling me that it's still not past its use by date, because it was an old packet that I didn't have had for a while, so I wasn't sure. And now I'm just going to add in some flour. I'm not an expert bread maker, but I do find that doing a little biga or a little pre-fermented yeast, water and flour and leaving it for 2 to 3 hours or even overnight helps develop a more complex flavor. I was short on time, so I only left this for 2.5 hours, I think, but it still did expand quite a bit. That is 2 kilograms exactly. Now I mix a new batch of flour, yeast, water, olive oil and sugar. I add the salt a bit later when I'm kneading it so it doesn't mix directly with the yeast. And I almost forgot to add the pre-fermented dough ball. I break it up into pieces so it distributes evenly. I moved over to the marble table to knead the dough. I basically kneaded in 3 parts, tending to Gianfranco in between, covering the dough and leaving it to rest for 10 to 15 minutes each time. And you'll find that each time you come back, the dough will be smoother. It gives it time to rest and means it doesn't become tight and difficult to manage. Then I cut it roughly in 2 and I roll out 1/2 for the base. I find it easier to roll onto a sheet of baking paper so I can transfer it to the tray. I'm using 2 kilos of grapes, but honestly, I think I could have used even more. Some sugar, olive oil, and rosemary. And then another layer of schiacciata. Pinch the edges to seal it all in, and more grapes, I gently press the grapes deep into the dough, sugar, olive oil, and then leave this for 1 to 2 hours to rise a bit more. And then I put it in an oven preheated to 170 degrees Celsius until it is golden. It's a bit hard with this one because it should be still wet and juicy in the center where the grapes have softened, but I lifted a corner to check that the bottom was golden underneath. And then I left it overnight to cool. It tastes even better the next morning. The delicious sticky juice of the grapes has settled into the dough, and although I'm off sugar for the pregnancy, I did have one bite just to test it, and it was so crisp on the edges but soft and chewy and fragrant with olive oil, rosemary, and sweet roasted grapes. I took this to a lunch full of Florentines that day as dessert, and they devoured it. I love messy, unctuous food like this, which really has changed so little in the hundreds of years Italians have been eating it. Some say a version of schiacciata all'uva was even made in Etruscan times. If you enjoyed any of this episode, I would so love for you to give the video a little like. Thank you for sharing your time with me. Thank you to my patrons, and I'll see you next episode. Alla prossima.